ॐ स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। So, we will continue our discussion of the Sankhya philosophy. Sankhya, perfect knowledge. That is why it is said that Nasti Sankhya Samam Jnanam. There is no knowledge like the Sankhya, because it is perfect knowledge and you cannot do better than perfection. After you've reached perfection, there is nothing more to be done. So once the Purusha has been completely disassociated with Prakriti, he regains his perfection. That is the thing. That is why when the full knowledge is gained, perfection is reached. That is why it is said, Nasti Sankhya Samam Jnanam. There is no knowledge like the knowledge of the Sankhya or the knowledge of the Purusha, which is our real nature. So we had started with the theory of causation, Satkaryavada. The theory of causation is very important because according to the Sankhya, the theory of evolution of cosmos out of Prakriti is based on the theory of causation. We have already done that. It maintains that the effect pre-exists in the cause in a potential condition. And the effect is just a modification of the cause. It is a manifestation, a development, a redistribution of the cause. It is not something absolutely new like the Nyaya Vaisheshika holds. So the effect was already existing in the cause. It was existing means it was Sat. From that comes the name Satkarya. So production, according to Sankhya and also Advaita Vedanta, is just a manifestation, mind you. Production is not something coming out of nothing that can never happen. It is just a manifestation, and destruction is also, destruction does not mean that something vanishes into thin air. That can never be. Destruction is just disappearance, which is called Tirobhava. So Avirbhava and Tirobhava, manifestation and disappearance. Disappearance means it just gets absorbed into its cause. It passes into a latent condition from which it can be manifested again. So cause and effect are different states of one and the same substance. That is the main thing we have to understand. Mind you, this is true for the material cause. We have already discussed in short last time the two types of causes. So this we should remember. This will come again and again when we discuss philosophy. Two causes are material cause and the efficient cause. Material cause, the word itself tells us what it means. The material out of which a substance is made, that is the material cause. So when a necklace is made up of gold, the gold is the material cause, but the one who makes the necklace, the goldsmith, he is the efficient cause. So when we say that the effect is different from the, not different from the cause, we should remember that here we mean material cause. The necklace is not really different from the gold from which it is made. You see, the material, the efficient cause is something external. The goldsmith is external. But the material cause enters into the constitution of the effect. The gold enters into the necklace. The potentiality of being reproduced in the form of the effect resides in it. In the gold, in the raw gold, resides the potentiality of being converted into a necklace, a ring, a bracelet, anything. But the efficient cause, the goldsmith, just exerts an extraneous influence on the effect. So, gold as the material cause of the necklace will exist in the necklace till the necklace exists in its present form. It will continue to be operative as long as the necklace will last. And when the necklace is destroyed, then again it will relapse into the potential condition. But the activity of the goldsmith is the efficient cause of the ornament. The goldsmith just liberates the energy, the potentiality which lies in the gold of becoming a necklace. So, goldsmith, his work ceases as soon as the necklace is finished. But till the necklace retains its shape, the gold will be in a part of its constitution. This is the difference between the efficient cause and the material cause. We will again and again we will repeat that, so automatically we will remember. So Prakriti, as we have discussed last time, is the material cause of all the matter, all the substances in the universe. It is the root evolvent which is uncaused itself. So the first cause, the primal cause, which is called Pradhana, that is the Prakriti, which is called Moola Prakriti. Moola Prakriti means original Prakriti. So Prakriti, as we have seen, although it is the root cause of everything, it itself is uncaused. And it is imperceptible. It is imperceptible. Why? Because it is so subtle. But subtlety here does not mean fine matter, mind you. It is not that if something is very, very subtle, very, very fine, like atoms or something, atoms are also imperceptible, but they are just fine matter. That's why they are imperceptible. But Prakriti is not like that, because Prakriti is also the cause of the finest matter. So here subtlety means a general attribute of Prakriti which prevents its cognition by perception. That is the thing. So Prakriti is also called Pradhana because all effects are founded on it. And Prakriti itself is all called Avyakta also because it is unmanifested. Avyakta means unmanifested. When you take out the A from Avyakta, it becomes Vyakta. So the meaning becomes opposite, that is manifested. So Vyakta means manifested, and when you add A, it becomes opposite in meaning, that is unmanifested, which is called Prakriti. So Prakriti, mind you, is not primal matter because it is the ground of all modifications, physical as well as psychical. The mind, etc., all are products of Prakriti. It is the root cause of matter, life and mind. All inorganic, organic and mental products are modifications of Prakriti. It is the root cause of all objective existence. This is the thing. So now we can start relating this to the Gita also, because we are primarily reading all this to understand the Gita. So what does the Gita say? Gita says, one of the verses, Shri Krishna says to Arjuna, Mama yonir mahad brahma tasmin garbham dadhamyaham sambhava sarva bhutanam tato bhavati bharata. Mama yoni means my womb is the great nourisher or the Prakriti. Tasmin, in that I place the seed. Tasmin garbham dadami aham. Sambhava sarva bhutanam tato bhavati bharata. O Arjuna, from that occurs the birth of all beings. This is the thing. So, who places the seed in the Prakriti for all this manifestation of the world? God says it is I who do so. I place the seed of creation in Prakriti, and from that seed the whole creation evolves. Of course, we will discuss all these verses of the Gita in detail. I am just mentioning here too so that we can relate. So now today we will discuss what this Prakriti is made up of. Prakriti is made up of gunas. Gunas means they are not qualities, they are substances from which Prakriti is made. And you know what they are? The three gunas are Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. Gunas like Prakriti can neither be created nor annihilated. They are eternal like Prakriti. The cause Prakriti is made up of these three elements. So, as the effect is not different from its material cause, all the objects in the world also contains these three gunas. That is the thing. So, in all the objects, the gunas are merely redistributed in another form. So you see, the law of causation or Satkaryavada is nothing but the law of conservation of energy. No energy can be created or lost. It can only be transformed. So Prakriti, when it evolves into all these things, it just transforms itself, and naturally, since the effect is already present in the cause, so the three gunas from which all these things are made are also constituent matters of Prakriti. So we know that all the things in the world are also made up of three gunas, but in different proportion. This is the thing. So what happens actually? It is said that when before creation the gunas are in equilibrium in Prakriti, that is called Samya Avastha. They are in equilibrium. So when this equilibrium is disturbed, then creation starts. So this term guna, there are two derivations of the term guna. One derivation is that it is subservient to the ends of the Purusha. All this creation is just for the sake of the Purusha, mind you, so that Purusha can experience this and liberate himself. So that is a Sanskrit derivation. So gunas are called so because they are subservient to Purusha, and another meaning of the word guna is rope. In Sanskrit, guna also means rope. So why is this meaning given? Because like a rope, the gunas bind the Purusha to the world. That is the thing. These three gunas are binding us to the world. This body is also made up of gunas, mind you. Our mind is also made up of gunas. We are beyond all these, but we have been interconnected with them. Even if we want, we cannot leave this body and mind. We are bound to it. If someone has tied someone to a pillar, he cannot free himself unless someone helps him. Similarly, we are bound to this body. If there is a toothache, we run to the dentist. If there is a heartache, we run to the heart surgeon. If there is a problem in the lungs, we will go to the lung specialist. We cannot do otherwise because we are bound to this body. We cannot say, oh, let me leave the body and go. We cannot do so. So, all this matter made up of Prakriti, made up of the gunas, are binding us to the phenomenal existence. So like a rope, suppose a rope has 3 strands, white, black and red. Actually the gunas are have been associated with these colors. So suppose there are 3 strands of a rope of different colors. That binds someone. So that is why the gunas are just like that rope, which is binding us to the world. And what is the parallel verse in the Gita? Shri Krishna says to Arjuna, Sattvam rajastama iti guna prakriti sambhava nibadnanti mahabhaho dehe dehinam avyayam. O Arjuna, Sattvam rajastama iti, these 3 gunas, Prakriti Sambhava, they are born of Prakriti. And what do? Nibadnanti, they bind. Who do they bind? They bind that which is avyayam, that which is immutable, that which is free. They bind him. They bind him to what? Dehe. Deha means body. So we are bound by this body. We are in a completely bound condition, but we don't realize it. We are doing this, that, we think we are free. We are going here and there, we think we are enjoying. But we don't realize that we are in a completely bound condition. We cannot get rid of this bondage unless we try really very hard. We are just slaves in the hands of the gunas, slaves in the hands of Prakriti. This we should remember. So, the gunas bind us, and like Prakriti, gunas are not perceived by us. They are so subtle, they are not perceived by us, but like Prakriti, which is inferred, by inference, we know that there must be a root cause of the world, because everything has a cause. So by inference, we can know that when we go from one cause to the effect, we must arrive at the first cause from which everything has come. From that we can infer Prakriti, although we cannot see it. Similarly, the gunas also, the existence of the gunas also, we can infer from the objects of the world, which are the effects of the gunas, because there is an essential identity between the cause and the effect. So you see, that's why we will discuss Satkaryavada in so detail, because the whole evolution is dependent upon this one theory, that the cause is not different from the effect. So since all these things are the effects of the gunas, from these we can infer that the gunas exist. We know the nature of the gunas from the nature of their products. All the objects of the world, from the intellect down to the ordinary objects, table, chair, etc., are found to possess 3 characters. This we have just touched upon last time. I had told that we will discuss it in detail, because this is very important and very interesting also. How do we infer the presence of the gunas from the objects? You see, all the objects in the world, generally what do we think? We think that this object is pleasurable, this object is painful, this object is, we are indifferent to some objects. So in our mind we have made a classification that the objects themselves are pleasurable or painful or something which we can be indifferent to. But this is completely wrong. Why? Because Sankhya says each and every object of the world is capable of producing these three feelings. What? Pleasure, pain and indifference. So, from this, when we discuss it in detail, we will realize that pleasure is not in objects. The whole life we try to find happiness and pleasure by going after objects. But when we discuss this, we will know that this is a futile search. Pleasure is not in the objects. It is we who superimpose the feeling of pleasure upon the object. Because the same object which is giving us pleasure can cause pain to someone else. So each of the three characters, the capability to produce pleasure, pain and indifference are there in each substance of the world. Some very simple examples will make it clear. The same thing is pleasurable to some person, painful to another person, while the third person may be neutral to it. For example, the cuckoo's cry. A bird is shrilling, the sound is being made. Now an artist is there. Artist will derive some pleasure from that. He will maybe compose a song or something just by hearing that beautiful sound, which to him appears beautiful. But his sick friend is lying there, suppose. He has a friend who is sick, fever, he can't stand loud noise. He will say, oh my God, shut that bird up. It is so painful. Okay. But to the third person, it doesn't matter. The cuckoos, whether it cries or not, whether it makes any sound or not, it does not matter. So a rose, suppose a rose, a beautiful rose, a young person will go and smell it and he says, oh, what a beautiful rose, what a beautiful scent. But suppose you give it to a dying man with a beautiful rose with a beautiful scent, that will cause him dejection. Oh, I am going away from the world, I will no longer be able to see or smell this beautiful rose. But the same rose, to the gardener, it doesn't produce much effect. He sees this every day. He is every day dealing with hundreds of roses and plants and in so many gardens, that is just his job. He goes to one place, he grows some roses, he leaves that place, he is not attached to it. He goes to another garden, he grows some more flowers, so he is indifferent to it. So suppose there is a war. There is victory and defeat. Has to be. So victory in war elates the victor. It gives him joy, but depresses the vanquished. They have lost the war. But if there is a third country who is not involved in the war, it doesn't matter to that country. What will the effect of the war be? So each event and each object of the world is capable of producing these three effects: pleasure, pain and indifference. In fact, even within the same person, the same object can produce either pleasure or pain in different circumstances. We suppose someone is fond of hearing loud music and all. So when he is healthy, he enjoys the loud music. But when he is sick, the same music appears to be painful to him. So what will you say? Does the pleasure exist in the music? Does the pleasure exist in the food we eat? Does the pleasure exist in any other enjoyment? Not at all. If pleasure existed in anything, suppose pleasure existed in this pen, then in whatever circumstances we would have got this pen, we would have got pleasure. If pleasure was really there. For example, nowadays you know what is going on. People are fond of these phones and smart gadgets and all that. They want to purchase a new phone every 6 months. So what happens? They think that if I get that phone, I will get a lot of happiness, pleasure. The phone comes, 1 or 2 days he will do this and that. After that, what happens? He wants a new phone. Though suppose the 10-year-old iPhone, suppose you give to a person, he will throw into the junk. But when it had recently come out, everybody was after that. So what is there? Pleasure was there in the phone? Not at all. If the pleasure would have been there, then we would have derived an equal amount of pleasure whenever we would have handled the phone. But that doesn't happen. So this is a great lesson to learn. So this is the thing. Now, when we see that each object of the world is capable of producing these three feelings: pleasure, pain and indifference. These are all the objects are effects. So from that, what do we derive? Applying Satkaryavada, from that we can infer that even the root cause of the world must have these three characteristics. It must have the capability of producing pleasure, pain and indifference. And this capability exists in the gunas. That is how we infer the presence of the gunas, by seeing the objects of the world. So the Sankhya calls these three gunas Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. And since each object of the world has these three characteristics, we know that they are made up of three gunas. Sattva gives rise to pleasure, Rajas gives rise to pain, and Tamas stands for indifference. So these are constituents of not only Prakriti, but of each and every object in the world. This is the thing. Since they are the constituents of each object, therefore each object is capable of giving us pleasure, pain or simply giving rise to a feeling of indifference. So just now we can just discuss in brief the qualities of these gunas. We have already said that Sattva gives us pleasure. So Sattva is that element of Prakriti which is of the nature of pleasure. It is said to be bright or illuminating, and also light in weight, whatever that may mean. So the manifestation of objects in our consciousness, all the knowledge which we derive, when we see something, I see this pen, so my mind immediately tells me that this is a pen. This knowledge is derived from Sattva Guna. Sattva Guna gives us all types of knowledge. So the manifestation of objects in consciousness, our consciousness, is due to the operation of Sattva. Similarly, it is said that all sorts of lightness, in the sense of upward motion, like the blazing of a fire and the vapor when we boil water, vapor always rises up. So all these are supposed to be the activities of the sattva. And of course, joy, the higher type of joy, satisfaction, etc., bliss, contentment, which is produced in our mind, is due to sattva. So pleasure, higher types of pleasure are produced by sattva, but the lower types of pleasure, which is sense pleasure, those actually don't give us real joy. Those are actually pain causing. They are produced by rajas. Rajas is the principle of activity in things. It always moves and makes things move. So it itself is mobile and also stimulating. Suppose there is a car, and with the car there is a string attached, and with the string there are many objects attached. So the car itself moves, and with that it also moves all the objects to which it is attached. So the car itself moves and moves other objects also. So rajas is also like that. It itself is mobile and also stimulates movements in other things. Actually, the sattva and the tamas also can act only because of rajas. So it is on account of rajas that fire spreads, wind blows, senses follow their objects, and unfortunately the mind also becomes restless. So when the mind becomes restless, more restless than it usually is, it is always restless. So we should know that rajas is increasing. And actually rajas is the cause of all painful experiences. It is itself of the nature of pain. And what does it do? How does it help us? Actually, it helps the elements of sattva and tamas, which are actually inactive and motionless. Actually, rajas helps them to perform their functions. So rajas gives us pain, but actually rajas is also responsible for the activity of sattva guna. So in an indirect way, actually rajas is also responsible for the higher bliss that we get. And last of all, tamas is the principle of passivity and negativity in all the things. It is opposed to sattva because it is said to be heavy, and it obstructs the manifestation of objects in our consciousness. See, when we are alert, when my mind is working properly, then I can see this, okay, this pen, I can see this pen. Immediately I recognize this to be a pen because my sattva guna is active. But what happens? Suppose I am given a very high sedative. I can barely open my eyes. Then suppose if I see this pen also, I may fail to recognize it. I may not know what this is. The manifestation of this object will be prevented in my consciousness by the effects of the medicine which is causing drowsiness. So this means that tamas has been increased by that medicine. So tamas, when it increases so much, it obstructs the sattva and prevents the manifestation of this knowledge in our consciousness. This is the thing. And tamas also resists the principle of rajas or activity. When we are fine in body and mind, we are alert, we are ready to move and go anywhere, ready for any activity, for any work. But if we are the whole day we are tired by work, what do we say? Oh my God, I can hardly stand. I just have to lie down. So that time tamas has become so predominant that it is obstructing the activity of Rajas. We cannot move. Only after rest, when the body is refreshed, when again the three gunas are in balance, then again we are ready to work, because again the Rajas, Sattva and Tamas, again they become active in the more or less the same proportion. So Tamas counteracts Sattva as well as Rajas. It counteracts the power of manifestation in the mind, the intellect and other things, and thereby produces ignorance and darkness and leads to confusion, that is called moha. And by obstructing the principle of activity in us, it induces sleep, drowsiness and laziness. That is the quality of tamas. So in the Sankhya Karika, original Karika, all this has been mentioned beautifully in a single verse, that Priti Apriti Vishadatmaka. Priti means pleasurable. Apriti means pain. And Vishada means here delusion. So Priti Apriti Vishadatmaka, these are the three gunas. They produce pleasure, pain and indifference. So why is it mentioned like this, that pleasure, pain and indifference in this? Why is it mentioned in the Karika like this? Because to show us that pleasure and pain are not only mutual negations, but they are positive entities. Pleasure is a positive entity. Pain is a pleasurable, positive entity. It is not that the absence of pleasure is pain, or just the absence of pain is pleasure. It is not like that. They are actually positive entities. To show this, it has been mentioned like this: Priti Apriti Vishadatmaka. So these are the characteristics of Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. And just we can relate this to the Gita. In the chapter dealing with the three gunas, Shri Krishna says in the 3 verses, in very brief, what the gunas, what do they produce, each of them. So regarding Sattva, he says, Tatra Sattvam Nirmalatvat Prakashakam Namayam Sukha Sangena Badnati Jnana Sangena Chanagha. O Anagha, O sinless one, Arjuna, Sattva, being pure, pure means Nirmala, being pure, is Prakashaka. Prakashaka means revealer. It reveals everything and is sorrowless. And what does it do? How does it bind the jiva? Sukha Sangena Badnati. Badnati means binds. How? With pleasure. It binds with pleasure. Pleasure is also bondage. And what about Raja? Rajo ragatmakam vidhi trishna sanga samudbhavam tannibadnati kaunteya karma sangena dehinam. Rajo ragatmakam vidhi. Ragatmakam means no rajas to be of the nature of passion, and it is born of what? Trishna, born of hankering and attachment, and it binds the soul through attachment to action. Karma sangena dehinam badnati. And what about tamas? Tamastu jnanajam vidhi mohanam sarvadehinam pramadalasya nidrabhi tannibadnati bharata. Tamas is the great deluder. Mohanam. Moha means delusion. It throws all the living beings into delusion, which is and is born of ignorance. Ajnana jam. Jam means born of. Of what? Ajnana, of ignorance. What does tamas bind us through? It binds through pramada, inadvertence, alasya, laziness, and sleep. So all the three gunas bind us, but they bind us in different ways. Sattva binds us through pleasure, Rajas binds us through action, and Tamas is the worst of the lot. It binds us through sleep and laziness. So, whenever we see that we are becoming lazy, we should know that Tamas is increasing. So, we have to convert that Tamas first to Rajas by being active. Then only we can convert that Rajas to Sattva Guna. See, practical example I will tell you, we all know this. Suppose we are feeling lazy for some reason. Now, if at that moment we sit down and try to study any book, what happens? We just fall asleep. Is it not so? So what do we do then? We go wash our face and have a brisk walk. So actually what are we doing? We are converting that tamas to rajas. Because tamas cannot be converted to sattva directly. When we are reading a book, we need the preponderance of sattva guna, because otherwise we cannot gain knowledge from the book. But when we are in tamas, asleep and drowsy, we cannot simply get up and start reading a book. We all know that. So we have to go through rajas. So this is our daily experience, how these gunas act in our mind and body. And with regard to the relation among the three gunas, this is the effect of the gunas on us, on every object of the world. Now, what about their interrelation? See, it is a very strange one that all the three gunas have contradictory nature. So their relation is of constant conflict as well as cooperation. Both exists. Conflict as well as cooperation. We will just, by some examples, it will be clear. And another thing is that these gunas always go together and they can never be separated from one another. Never. The amount, the manifestation of the guna may change. Some may have higher sattva guna, some may have higher rajas, but it is not that a person of high sattva guna does not have tamas at all. He will have, but very little. And if they want to produce anything, one guna cannot produce anything without the support of other two gunas. So they are cooperating, but they have mutually contradicting properties. How can that be? The question can be asked. They are mutually contradictive, they are always cancelling each other. So how can they cooperate for anything? A beautiful example is given. There is a wick and there is an oil in a lamp. When we light a lamp, not the electricity lamp, the old-fashioned lamp, there is a wick and the oil. So both are contradictory to the flame. The flame burns both the wick and the oil. But still, the wick and the oil, they cooperate to produce the flame. Another beautiful example is there. All those who are familiar with this Ayurveda and all, they know that there are three humors in the body. Vitta, Pata and Vitta, Vata and Kapha. Pitta, Vata and Kapha. Wind, bile and phlegm. Wind is Vata, bile is Pitta and phlegm is Kapha. So all these three are mutually opposite things. They are contradictory, their properties are contradictory, but they cooperate with each other to sustain our body. So they are cooperating to sustain someone else. They are cooperating to sustain a third party, which is this body. In the same way, Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, although they have contrary attributes, they cooperate for the single purpose of bringing about the emancipation of the Purusha. That is their function. The whole of Prakriti has only one function, only one, that is to liberate the Purusha. It is only for the experience of Purusha so that the Purusha can liberate itself. In itself, the world is nothing, it has no value at all. There is no progress, no regress, nothing happening in the world which is of any consequence, because all these things have happened, they are nothing new and they will happen again. They are only for our experience so that we can experience and become free. Till we are free, we will go on experiencing them till eternity. That is the function of Prakriti. That is a very big lesson to learn. So, although these gunas have contradictory qualities and they are present in everything of the world, but each of them cooperates to liberate the Purusha. At the same time, each of them also tries to suppress and dominate the others. And each substance of the world is composed of these gunas. And the nature of the substance, nature of anything, is determined by the guna which is predominant in that substance. If something has more of sattva, it will be sattvika. If something has more of rajas, some persons are very active, hyperactive, we know that rajas is predominant in them. Some persons are calm, quiet, etc. We know that sattva is predominant in them. And if some person is lazy, we know that tamas is predominant in those persons. So the classification of objects into good, bad and indifferent, or into pure, impure or neutral, or intelligent, active and indolent, has reference to the preponderance of sattva, rajas and tamas respectively. That is why Shri Krishna says to Arjuna in the Gita, Rajas tamas cha vibhuya sattvam bhavati bharata rajasattvam tamas chaiva tamas sattvam rajas tatha. O Arjuna, sattva increases by subduing rajas and tamas. Similarly, rajas increases by overpowering sattva and tamas increases by dominating sattva and rajas. This is the thing. So they are mutually contradictory, but also they cooperate with each other. One cannot function without the other. And another characteristic of the gunas is that they are constantly changing. They are not still for even a moment. So no object of the world can arise unless the gunas combine with each other and one of them generally predominates over the others. So before creation, the gunas existed as a homogeneous mass in which there was no motion, etc. and none of the qualities of the sound, touch, color, etc. That was the state of equilibrium of the gunas. But transformation starts taking place when the gunas become active and dominate over one another. So when this happens, we have the production of a particular object, and such transformation is the starting point of the evolution of the world. This is the thing. So when gunas are in equilibrium, nothing happens. But when they are disturbed, then they start functioning. But this equilibrium of the gunas, mind you, is not something like a restful state. It is not that gunas are sleeping and then they are made to awaken. No. This equilibrium is like a tension. Suppose I take 3 rubber bands. I tie 3 rubber bands to my 3 fingers here and pull like this. So each rubber band will be pulling each other. Each of them will be motionless, but they will be in a state of tension. As soon as you remove the tension, there will be movement. So the gunas, their equilibrium is not that they are restfully sleeping. No, it is not that. They are somehow preventing each other by this tension from manifesting. But as soon as the tension is released, they start producing this world. So from inactivity, they go to an activity. So infinite number of sattva, rajas and tamas counteract their activities and bring about a state of tension. Then they relieve the tension and break the equilibrium under the influence of the Purusha. And once the equilibrium is disturbed, then Prakriti evolves to manifest all these things. That is the thing. When the equilibrium is disturbed, the gunas are disturbed, some gunas overpower other gunas and start the process of evolution. This is the thing. So, just we can sum up now, and it will be easier if you can also read the points. So I will just share what we have discussed. So here you can see in summary the gunas. First of all, the gunas are constituents of Prakriti. The Prakriti is made up of these gunas. Second is the gunas are invisible. Their presence can only be inferred. Third, we have seen that Sattva gives rise to joy, Rajas to activity, Tamas to passivity. Fourth, the gunas can never be separated from one another. Fifth, the relation of the gunas is that of constant conflict as well as cooperation. Sixth, the nature of anything, any object in the world is determined by the predominant guna in it. Seventh, the gunas are constantly changing. They are not still even for a moment unless they are in that samya avastha. At that time they are all still. And gunas finally can never be created or destroyed or changed into one another. So this is the, in summary, in brief, this is the what we have discussed about the gunas. So now next we have to go to one for whom all this drama is taking place. All this universe, it has no meaning in itself. No meaning at all. It is only for the experience of the Purusha. It is only for our experience. Problem is our energies are being always utilized in the wrong direction. We think that this world, we will do this in the world, we will improve the world in this way, we will get something from the world in this way. So the thing has been completely upside down. The soul for the world, that is what we have become. We have started living for the sake of the world, but we forget that the world is only for our sake. It is only for our experience. We are not going to get anything out of this world at all. It is just so that we can experience this and become liberated. Experience, learn our lesson and be free. But if we keep on experiencing and we don't learn the lesson from that, this endless round of birth and death will continue to go on. All the experience which we have, pain, pleasure, whatever we experience, is only to teach us. Teach us so that we can be rid of attachment to this Prakriti. Again and again the world gives us a kick, a big kick, telling that there is no happiness here. What you are searching for is not in this world. But again and again we forget that. Again and again we go to the world for our pleasure and happiness. So till we learn our lesson, we will continue to be involved in this world and will never be free from all these entanglements. So we should remember that Prakriti is for Purusha. Purusha is not for Prakriti. So next we will discuss the one for whose sake, for whose liberation all this drama is taking place through eternity, and it will continue through eternity till we learn our lesson. That is the Purusha, which we are, but which we have conveniently forgotten, and we think that we are this mind, we are so and so, we are this body, we are happy, we are sad, we are doing this, we are doing that. We are doing nothing. We were never sad, we were never happy. We are always in a state which is far beyond Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. We are in a state which is far beyond this small pleasure and pain. But thanks to the gunas, we have been completely bound. Till we can break this rope, cut this rope with the sword of knowledge, we will continue to experience this pleasure and pain through eternity, mind you. So, the sooner we learn our lesson, I think the better. So, let's stop here. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu.